They say every great city has a smell. Medieval Edinburgh had one you could never forget. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that the year is somewhere in the late Middle Ages. You wake before sunrise, not because an alarm clock rings, but because the room around you has grown too cold to stay asleep. Your blanket is rough wool. Your mattress is stuffed with straw that crackles every time you move. Thin morning light slips through the wooden shutters, but before you even sit up, something reaches you first. It is not the fresh scent of rain. It is not bread baking in a nearby kitchen. It is the heavy mixture of damp stone, wood smoke, wet earth, animals, spoiled food, and countless other smells carried uphill by the cool Scottish air. You cross the tiny room and push open the shutters. The city stretches beneath you like something from a fairy tale. A great castle crowns the volcanic rock above. Narrow streets twist through rows of tall stone buildings. Church towers rise into the pale sky. From a distance, it almost looks magical. That is the illusion. Because the moment your window opens, the city reminds you what it really is. Somewhere below, a voice echoes through the street, warning people to watch their heads. A second later, a bucket of dirty household waste splashes into the narrow lane beneath. Life continues as though nothing unusual has happened. A merchant adjusts his cart. A woman hurries toward the market. Children weave between puddles without slowing down. Nobody looks surprised. Nobody complains. This is simply another morning in one of Europe's busiest medieval capitals. If you arrived here from the modern world, your first instinct might be to step backward and close the window again. But for the people who call this place home, there is nowhere else to go. Behind every stone wall lives another family. Above them, another. Below them, another. Every floor holds more people, more cooking fires, more animals, more laundry, more noise, and more life packed into a city that has long since outgrown the space beneath its walls. You may have seen paintings of medieval Edinburgh glowing beneath golden sunsets, or photographs of its ancient streets that survive today, inviting visitors from around the world. Those images tell only part of the story. They cannot capture the air you breathe, the mud beneath your boots, the constant dampness that clings to your clothes, or the invisible challenges waiting around every corner. To understand medieval Edinburgh, you have to forget the postcards. Forget the romantic castles, the heroic legends, and the quiet cobblestone streets visited by tourists centuries later. This was not a city built for comfort. It was a city built for survival. And before this day is over, you will discover why generations of people accepted conditions that would leave most modern visitors searching for the fastest road back home. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside, expecting that the fresh morning air might offer some relief. It does not. The street is barely wide enough for two loaded carts to pass each other, yet it carries the weight of an entire city. Every building seems to lean toward its neighbor, shutting out much of the daylight even after the sun has climbed above the horizon. Looking upward, you count 6, 7, even 8 stories stacked above the street. In most medieval towns, homes spread outward across open land. Here, they climbed toward the sky because there was almost nowhere else to build. High walls surrounded the city for protection, and beyond them lay uncertain countryside. Inside those walls, every square foot mattered. Families, merchants, laborers, apprentices, and travelers all competed for the same limited space. The result was one of the most crowded places in Northern Europe. From the outside, these towering buildings might seem impressive, almost ahead of their time. Living inside them was another matter entirely. Every floor meant another family cooking over an open fire, another bucket of water carried upstairs by hand, another load of fuel dragged through narrow staircases, another collection of daily waste that had to leave the building somehow. Gravity solved many problems, but it created others for everyone walking below. The steep hill beneath your feet shapes everything around you. The street rises sharply toward the castle and falls toward the busy market below. Rainwater rushes downhill whenever the weather changes, carrying mud, straw, ashes, scraps of food, and whatever else happens to be lying in its path. During dry weather, dust settles over everything. During wet weather, the streets become slippery mixtures of earth and refuse that cling stubbornly to boots. You quickly learn that walking here requires as much attention as climbing a rocky trail. Around you, the city is already fully awake. Blacksmiths strike glowing iron. Bakers carry fresh loaves toward market stalls. Fishmongers arrange their morning catch beside barrels packed with salt. Tailors open wooden shutters while apprentices sweep yesterday's dirt back into streets that are already far from clean. Every trade depends on every other trade, and every person depends on the city functioning despite its constant overcrowding. The smell that greeted you at dawn now becomes more complicated. Smoke drifts from hundreds of fireplaces because nearly every meal begins over burning wood or coal. Horses pull wagons through the narrow lanes. Chickens wander between doorways. Dogs search for scraps. The air never stays still long enough to separate one scent from another. Instead, everything blends into an invisible cloud that follows you through every corner of the city. Yet the people around you barely seem to notice. That may be the strangest discovery of all. Human beings have an extraordinary ability to accept the world they are born into. A child growing up here does not compare these streets to modern cities with underground pipes, garbage collection, or clean running water. This crowded hillside is simply home. The towering houses, the smoky air, the steep alleys, and the endless rhythm of neighbors living only a few feet apart define what normal feels like. And as you continue downhill toward the marketplace, you begin to realize that the city's greatest challenge is not merely how people live inside its walls. It is how thousands of ordinary lives somehow keep moving forward together in a place that has almost no room left to breathe. The farther you descend, the louder the city becomes. The marketplace is no longer waking up. It is fully alive. Voices overlap until individual conversations disappear into a constant human roar. Merchants advertise smoked fish, fresh oats, rough wool cloth, wooden bowls, iron nails, candles, leather boots, and salted meat. Customers examine every purchase carefully because a poor decision today might be felt for weeks. Money is limited, food spoils quickly, and every family must make careful choices. This crowded square is the beating heart of the city, but it is also where thousands of daily routines collide in the same small space. Fresh bread emerges from ovens only a few steps away from animal pens. Wagons loaded with firewood squeeze past men carrying barrels on their shoulders. Apprentices rush between workshops while church bells mark another hour of the morning. Everywhere you look, work is happening. Nothing about life here feels idle. Every pair of hands belongs to someone producing, repairing, transporting, buying, or selling something another person desperately needs. The smells continue to change with every few steps. Warm bread briefly replaces smoke before giving way to wet leather drying outside a workshop. Then comes the sharp scent of fish, followed by damp timber, burning coal, livestock, and spilled ale. Modern cities often separate industries into different neighborhoods. Medieval streets do not have that luxury. Everything exists side by side because space is precious and every business depends on foot traffic. Even sound behaves differently here. Stone walls reflect every conversation, every hammer strike, every horse hoof, and every creaking wagon wheel until the city seems larger than it truly is. Privacy is almost impossible to find. Your neighbors know when you wake, when you cook, when you argue, and when you celebrate because life unfolds within earshot of everyone else. Looking around, you begin to notice something else that paintings rarely show. Almost nobody owns very much. Clothing is practical rather than fashionable. Cloaks are patched. Boots have been repaired again and again instead of replaced. Wooden bowls last for years because new ones cost valuable money. Every object serves a purpose. Waste exists. But wastefulness is a luxury very few people can afford. That reality creates an interesting contradiction. People recycle almost everything they can. Broken tools become new tools. Old fabric becomes patches. Animal bones become handles, needles, or combs. Yet despite this constant reuse, the city still struggles to keep pace with the sheer number of people living inside its walls. Every sunrise brings another cycle of cooking, cleaning, trading, heating, feeding animals, and carrying water. Every sunset leaves behind another day's worth of ash, scraps, mud, and debris that the city must somehow absorb before tomorrow begins. You stop beside a public well where a line has already formed. Water is one of the most valuable resources in the city, and obtaining it demands patience as much as strength. Heavy buckets rise slowly from deep below before beginning another journey through steep streets and crowded staircases. Every gallon must be carried by hand. Every trip costs time and effort. Suddenly, something becomes clear. The greatest luxury in this city is not wealth, beautiful clothing, or even a comfortable home. It is convenience, and almost nobody possesses it. Every ordinary task demands labor that modern life has quietly erased. As the morning sun climbs higher above the rooftops, you realize that surviving here is not defined by dramatic moments. It is defined by hundreds of exhausting little ones that repeat every single day without pause. Leaving the busy marketplace behind, you carry your bucket toward one of the public wells, joining a line that seems to move more slowly than time itself. Everyone is waiting for the same thing because without water, nothing else in the city can happen. Bread cannot be baked. Clothes cannot be washed. Soup cannot be cooked. Workshops cannot clean their tools. Yet obtaining this simple necessity is never as easy as turning a faucet. Every gallon must be pulled from deep below, lifted by hand, and carried through steep streets that seem determined to test every step you take. By the time your bucket is finally full, it already feels heavier than you expected. The climb back uphill reminds you that every meal begins long before the first fire is lit. Every household repeats this same journey day after day, year after year. Water is precious not because people fail to understand its value, but because bringing it home demands strength, patience, and time. You notice that many families use every drop carefully. Fresh water is reserved for drinking and cooking whenever possible. Nothing is wasted without reason. Even so, keeping water completely clean inside such a crowded city is an endless challenge. Rain washes through the narrow streets. Animals move alongside people. Smoke settles over rooftops before drifting downward again. Countless daily activities happen within only a few yards of one another. Cleanliness is not simply a matter of good habits. It is shaped by the environment itself. As noon approaches, kitchens across the city begin preparing the day's main meal. Thin oat porridge bubbles over open fires while loaves of coarse bread are sliced beside wheels of cheese, dried peas, onions, and salted fish. Wealthier households may enjoy more variety, but for most people, meals are designed to satisfy hunger rather than impress the senses. Every ingredient represents hours of labor somewhere beyond the city walls. Farmers, millers, bakers, fishermen, merchants, and carters all contribute to the simple bowl now warming your hands. Looking into it, you realize how closely survival depends upon countless strangers doing their work well. There is another detail modern visitors often overlook. Every fire filling these homes with warmth also fills them with smoke. Chimneys exist in some buildings, but they are far from perfect. Thin gray clouds linger beneath timber ceilings before slowly escaping through vents, windows, and cracks in the roof. Your eyes begin to sting slightly after only a short time indoors. The people around you barely react. Their lungs have spent years adapting to an atmosphere that never becomes completely clear. Outside, fresh air exists, but even that carries the scent of hundreds of nearby hearths burning together. Comfort, once again, proves to be relative. You begin to understand that survival here depends less on avoiding hardship than on accepting it as an ordinary part of life. Every bucket carried uphill, every loaf divided among family members, every log placed onto the fire, and every careful choice about how to use limited resources quietly determines whether tomorrow begins with enough strength to repeat the entire cycle once more. The afternoon passes almost without notice because time here is measured less by clocks than by work that never seems to end. Your empty bowl has long since been washed and put away, but there is no opportunity to rest. Firewood must be gathered or purchased before evening. Clothing needs mending. Floors must be swept. Ashes have to be cleared from the hearth. Every ordinary task leaves behind another task waiting quietly beside it. Looking around the neighborhood, you realize that almost every doorway tells the same story. Someone is carrying water. Someone is repairing a roof with rough timber. Someone is spinning wool beside a window where daylight is strongest. Children run errands not because they are playing games, but because every member of the household contributes in some small way. Life inside the city depends upon constant movement. Standing still for too long is a privilege very few people can afford. As the sun slowly begins its descent, the narrow lanes grow even busier. Farmers arriving from the countryside hurry to finish business before the gates eventually close for the night. Pack horses climb the steep streets with sacks of grain, bundles of hay, and barrels of ale. Shopkeepers bargain over prices while apprentices carry goods that seem almost too heavy for their shoulders. Everyone appears to understand that daylight itself is a valuable resource. Without electric lights, every remaining hour before sunset matters. You pause beside a craftsman's workshop where careful hands shape wood into bowls, spoons, and buckets. Nothing is decorated unless decoration serves a purpose. Beauty certainly exists, but usefulness comes first. A well-made chair might remain in the same family for decades. A sturdy barrel protects precious food through long winters. Even a simple wooden spoon represents time, skill, and materials that cannot be replaced carelessly. The city teaches people to value durability because replacing everyday possessions is neither quick nor inexpensive. The buildings surrounding you reveal another quiet truth. They are never truly finished. A loose board is repaired. A cracked beam is reinforced. A leaking roof receives fresh thatch or new shingles whenever materials become available. Every generation inherits structures built by the one before it and leaves behind improvements for those who come next. Medieval cities are living things, changing little by little every season without anyone noticing the transformation while it happens. You begin climbing back toward the place where your day started. The hill feels steeper now, your boots heavier, your shoulders sore from carrying supplies through winding streets. Yet everyone around you continues climbing without complaint. They have repeated this journey thousands of times before. Their bodies understand the city almost as well as their minds do. The steep roads, crowded buildings, smoky air, and endless labor are not extraordinary challenges. They are simply the shape of ordinary life. That realization may be the greatest surprise of all. The hardships that stand out so clearly to modern eyes have become nearly invisible to the people living through them. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to adapt, and nowhere is that easier to see than in a place where survival depends not upon escaping difficulty, but upon quietly accepting it every single day. As the afternoon slowly fades, the light changes almost without warning. The narrow streets that seemed merely crowded a few hours ago now grow noticeably darker as the tall buildings steal the last warmth of the sun. Long shadows stretch across the stone roadway, and shopkeepers begin bringing their goods indoors one table at a time. You can feel the entire city preparing for night long before darkness actually arrives. Unlike the modern world, evening is not simply another part of the day. It changes the rhythm of life itself. Every task that depends upon daylight must be finished quickly. A cobbler hurries to complete one final pair of shoes before he can no longer see his stitching clearly. A merchant counts coins while there is still enough natural light to avoid costly mistakes. Families gather bundles of firewood because once the sun disappears, warmth becomes almost as valuable as food. You notice that people instinctively quicken their pace. Nobody wastes unnecessary time outdoors. Inside the house where you will spend the evening, preparations begin immediately. Fresh fuel is added to the hearth, not only for cooking, but also to push back the chill that creeps through thick stone walls as temperatures fall. The room slowly fills with familiar smoke once again. It is not pleasant, but it is reassuring. Fire means warmth. Fire means light. Fire means another night made slightly easier to endure. Candles are available, but they are used carefully. Every inch of wax represents expense. Every flame consumes something valuable. For many households, darkness simply means accepting that certain kinds of work must wait until tomorrow. Supper is simple but satisfying after a full day of labor. Thick bread, a pot of vegetable stew, perhaps a little cheese or salted fish if supplies allow. Nobody expects endless variety. A dependable meal is considered a blessing in itself. Around the table, conversation turns to weather, prices at the market, rumors carried into the city by travelers, and hopes that tomorrow's work will be enough to keep the household comfortable through another week. These quiet conversations rarely appear in history books, yet they form the fabric of everyday life for generations. Outside, the streets begin emptying. The constant roar of commerce fades into scattered footsteps and distant voices. Church bells echo across the hillside before gradually giving way to a quieter city. Even then, Edinburgh is never completely silent. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere a cart rolls over uneven stones. Somewhere a blacksmith finishes one last strike before closing his workshop. The city continues breathing, only more softly than before. Sitting beside the fire, you begin to understand something that was impossible to see in the busy hours of morning. The greatest challenge of living here is not any single hardship. It is the accumulation of hundreds of small inconveniences that never truly disappear. Cold, smoke, steep streets, crowded homes, heavy buckets, limited light, constant labor, and little privacy become ordinary because they are experienced together every day. The remarkable achievement of the people who lived here was not that they conquered these difficulties. It was that they built families, neighborhoods, friendships, businesses, and communities despite them, creating a city that remained vibrant even when comfort was often in short supply. Night has finally settled over the city, but darkness does not bring complete rest. Instead, it changes what people worry about. During the day, every concern revolves around work, food, and finishing essential tasks before sunset. After dusk, attention shifts toward warmth, weather, and tomorrow. Sitting beside the fading fire, you begin to notice how carefully everyone measures what remains. There is only so much firewood stacked against the wall. Every log placed onto the flames must justify the heat it provides. Burn too much tonight, and the morning may begin with cold hands and an empty woodpile. Burn too little, and the chill creeping through the stone walls will settle into every corner of the room before dawn. Outside, the wind moves through the narrow closes and alleyways, carrying the distant sound of church bells across the sleeping city. Somewhere a window closes with a dull thud. Somewhere footsteps echo against worn stone before disappearing into silence. The castle above remains a dark outline against the night sky, watching over thousands of homes packed tightly beneath it. From where you sit, the city almost seems peaceful. Yet that calm depends upon countless ordinary people preparing carefully for whatever tomorrow may bring. Weather alone can reshape an entire week. A period of heavy rain turns steep streets into slippery channels where moving supplies become slower and more exhausting. A harsh winter places extra pressure on food stores and fuel. Strong winds make simple errands feel twice as long. Nobody controls these changes, but everyone must adapt to them. That quiet flexibility becomes one of the city's greatest strengths. Families learn to store what they can, repair instead of replace, and rely upon neighbors when unexpected difficulties arise. You begin to understand that survival here is rarely the result of individual heroics. It grows from cooperation repeated over generations. Bakers depend upon millers. Millers depend upon farmers. Craftsmen depend upon merchants bringing raw materials through city gates. Households depend upon wells, markets, and shared knowledge passed from parent to child. Every ordinary routine forms another thread holding the community together. Remove enough of those threads, and daily life becomes far more difficult. Looking around the room, you notice how few possessions anyone actually owns, yet how carefully each one is treated. A wooden chest protects clothing from damp air. A sturdy cloak serves through many winters with careful repairs. A simple iron cooking pot may outlast the people using it. Every object tells a story of patience rather than convenience. Modern life often hides the effort required to maintain comfort. Here, that effort remains visible every single day. As the fire slowly settles into glowing embers, conversation becomes quieter. Tomorrow will arrive early, bringing another climb through crowded streets, another trip for water, another meal earned through labor, and another evening spent counting precious resources. Nothing about that routine appears extraordinary to the people living it. Yet from the perspective of centuries later, it reveals something remarkable. Even in a city famous for overcrowding, harsh conditions, and constant challenges, ordinary people continued building homes, raising families, practicing trades, and creating a community that endured because they learned not to wait for easier days, but to make the most of the ones they had. Before you finally drift to sleep, one thought quietly settles into your mind. It is easy for someone centuries later to look at this city and ask a simple question. Why would anyone choose to live like this? The answer is that very few people believe they had chosen it at all. This was the world they inherited, just as every generation inherits its own version of normal. The steep streets, crowded homes, smoky rooms, limited space, and constant labor did not feel unusual because there was nothing to compare them with. The people around you were not dreaming about modern plumbing, electric lights, central heating, or paved roads. Those ideas did not exist in their imagination. Instead, they measured a good day by different standards. Was there enough food for supper? Did the roof keep out the rain? Did the fire stay lit through the evening? Did the family remain healthy enough to work tomorrow? Success was built from small victories repeated day after day. That perspective changes the way you see everything around you. Earlier this morning, the crowded streets seemed overwhelming. Now they reveal something else. Every shop represents years of skill patiently learned from parents and masters. Every stone building reflects countless hours of labor without modern machinery. Every market stall connects distant farms, fishing villages, forests, and workshops into one living network. Even the city's famous overcrowding tells a larger story. People continued arriving because despite its hardships, opportunity existed here. Merchants found customers. Craftsmen found apprentices. Families believed the city offered possibilities that scattered rural settlements could not. Progress often came with uncomfortable trade-offs. The same density that created difficult living conditions also encouraged commerce, learning, and cooperation. Looking through the small window, you notice a few lights still glowing against the darkness. Somewhere a baker is preparing dough before dawn. Somewhere a watchman continues his rounds through quiet streets. Somewhere travelers have only just arrived after days on muddy roads, grateful simply to sleep inside sturdy walls. Thousands of individual lives continue unfolding at the same moment, each carrying its own worries, hopes, disappointments, and quiet achievements. History often remembers kings, battles, and political struggles because they leave dramatic records behind. Yet cities survive because ordinary people wake every morning and perform ordinary tasks with extraordinary consistency. They fetch water, repair roofs, bake bread, stitch clothing, sweep floors, raise children, and greet neighbors. Without those unseen routines, no castle, government, or kingdom could endure for very long. As your eyes grow heavy, the city feels different than it did when the day began. It is still crowded. It is still smoky. It is still demanding. But it no longer feels like a place defined only by hardship. Instead, it has become a reminder that human beings possess a remarkable ability to adapt to environments that would seem almost impossible to outsiders. The greatest lesson hidden within these ancient streets is not how uncomfortable medieval life could be. It is how resilient ordinary people became while living it, finding purpose, community, and even moments of quiet contentment in a world that asked something of them every single day. Morning will arrive again long before you feel fully rested. Someone nearby is already placing fresh wood onto a fire. Another family is opening heavy shutters to let in the pale Scottish light. Somewhere below, the first merchant begins arranging goods before customers appear. The city is preparing to repeat the same demanding rhythm that has shaped countless lives before yours. Yet as you stand once more at the small window overlooking the winding streets, something has changed. When you first opened these shutters, all you noticed was the smell. It seemed impossible to imagine how anyone could build a meaningful life in a place that felt so crowded, smoky, and relentlessly difficult. Now you see something else entirely. Every chimney, sending smoke into the morning sky, represents a household beginning another day together. Every narrow lane carries neighbors who know one another by name. Every workshop hides years of carefully practiced skill. Every market stall reflects relationships stretching far beyond the city walls, connecting fishermen, farmers, shepherds, craftsmen, merchants, and families into one living system. The city never became important because it was comfortable. It became important because people continued investing their effort, patience, and hope into it despite the discomfort. Looking across the rooftops, you understand why modern visitors sometimes misunderstand places like this. We often judge the past by comparing it with the conveniences we enjoy today. Running water, electric lighting, indoor heating, refrigeration, paved streets, and modern sanitation have quietly changed our expectations of everyday life. Remove those comforts, and medieval cities can seem almost impossible to imagine. Yet the people who lived here were not waiting for the future to rescue them. They solved problems with the knowledge, materials, and resources available to them. They repaired instead of replacing. They shared instead of wasting. They adapted instead of surrendering. That quiet determination rarely appears in paintings or dramatic stories, but it may be the most remarkable part of their history. The city's reputation for being one of Europe's least pleasant capitals was certainly earned in many ways. Yet that description tells only half of the story. It explains the conditions, but not the character of the people who endured them. Behind every weathered stone stood individuals who laughed with friends, celebrated holidays, worried about family, planned for tomorrow, and found reasons to keep moving forward. They were not characters living inside a history book. They were ordinary human beings navigating an extraordinary environment with resilience that still deserves admiration centuries later. As you close the wooden shutters once more, the familiar sounds of another busy morning continue outside without pause. The smell remains. The smoke remains. The steep streets remain. But now they no longer define the city by themselves. They have become part of a much larger story about endurance, adaptation, and community. Sometimes the greatest distance between the modern world and the medieval one is not measured in centuries. It is measured in perspective. Once you stop asking how people tolerated such a difficult place and begin asking how they built meaningful lives within it, the city transforms before your eyes. You do not leave remembering only the hardship. You leave remembering the people who made even the hardest place feel like home.